Right, everyone, let's please welcome Joe.
Hi, my name's Joe. I'm an alcoholic. How's everybody this Halloween? Good? Thanks for all coming in costume. Appreciate it. So who's never been to a position of neutrality meeting before? Anybody? Oh, good. A few of you. So first of all, welcome. And second, let me warn you in advance, you're liable to experience us just a little different than other meetings of other fellowships you may have attended. The primary reason that's liable to happen is we intend for you to have a different experience here. What we do here is we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week directly out of this book. And we use this book in crystal meth anonymous. Why? The process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work with addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances. So we call it a study so that people kind of get their head around what it is, but it's really more of a sharing. I'm not your teacher, but at some time tonight you're going to have an experience. When you do, I'll know. I'll call it to your attention, and that experience you'll be having, that'll be the teacher. Anyone? Some of you are not following me, but that's okay. It's okay. All right. In other words, the answers for you are in you. We're going to prove to you that power exists within you by the way you feel when we share that power with you. And the fact that I know, that demonstrates the oneness that we talk about at AA meetings, right? There's one who has all power. So if you're feeling something and I know, did we not demonstrate oneness? Okay. So tonight, unfortunately, we're going to have some highs and some lows because you're here on a first step night. Nice. So no one ever gets past an experience of powerless and unmanageability without having some kind of shitty experience, right? Okay. So first, let me show you why we do the meeting the way we do the meeting, because it is a little different. I know it's a little different. Been doing it for a lot of years. I've been told, Joe, that's a little different. I get it. So if you go to forward to your first edition in your book, XIII, Roman numeral 13, they tell us a little bit about the original fellowship and who the authors of the book are. They say, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So the reason I want you to see that is they're going to talk about an unfolding experience that you may or may not have had, and all of these we's are this we. By the time you go to an AA meeting, they'll read to you a little paragraph from the 5th chapter. They'll say, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. So I might join them, but if I don't have the experience they had, it's not because they lied, it's because I haven't followed their path. Because they're the we. Does that help? Because sometimes we have our own language in recovery. And we come in and people say, we're we. Well, maybe. But maybe not, because if I haven't done what they did, I may not experience what they did. Okay. So then it says, to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of the book. So, to show others rather than to tell. So, this power is better demonstrated as an observation than a declaration. Does that make sense? You'll see that there's a change come over people. How many of you have been at this even just a little while, and people notice that something's different with you, and they say, there's something different with you? Okay, well, then that's when we have an opportunity, if we've taken a third step, to give credit where we've offered, right? I got God, He sees to it, I do a little better, right? Okay, got it. Okay, so I'm not going to spend any more time there. I'm going to jump over to the doctor's opinion, because we're going to do a little different romp tonight through the first step. And I want to look at just this portion first. I want to go to the first paragraph on XXVIII. How many of you have heard in recovery rooms people talk about this allergy and you thought, nonsense, didn't make sense to you? Has that ever happened to you? How many of you have heard the jokes in our fellowship? Yeah, I drink and I break out in handcuffs. You ever heard that? So it doesn't make any sense. But this was a doctor's opinion about a condition that he took deathly serious, treating people. So it wasn't a joke, and it wasn't an outward manifestation. Does it make sense? It wasn't something silly. So let's read and see what he says. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. So what is an allergy to us laymen? Yeah, it's an abnormal reaction to something. Any drinkers here? When you drank, did you find that alcohol energized you?
Oh, yeah.
It's a sedative. So So to be energized by a sedative to a medical person, that would be I believe that could be the manifestation of an allergy. Now does it make sense? Where's my heroin addicts, my opiate addicts? Do you notice when you were out, everyone thought you were on, and when you were on, everyone thought, man, they're doing good. That's an abnormal reaction to a powerful sedative. Does it make sense? Are we with me? And you guys can figure it out from there, rather than go through the whole litany of chemicals that we all prescribe ourselves. Okay, so this manifestation of that phenomenon of craving is limited to this class. What class? The chronic alcoholic. Well, chronic simply means more than once. So do you have a pattern of perhaps unleashing the beast? Okay. And it never occurs in the average temperate drinker. So has it ever happened to you? No. So if it's never happened to you, then at least I've eliminated average temperate drinker from my lexicon. We don't know yet that I'm an addict, but we know I'm not an average temperate heroin user. Okay. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all, and once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it. Has that happened for you? Once having lost their self-confidence, has that happened for you? And for people who don't like to admit a loss of self-confidence, showing up in support fellowships is sometimes evidence of having lost self-confidence, even if we don't like to cop to it, okay? Not calling anyone out, the mind plays tricks. Okay, their reliance upon things human. How many of you have had people plead with you to stop? You knew it wasn't working out well. You really wanted to stop, and you promised to stop. So your will was involved, their will was involved, maybe even a lockup was involved. How many of you found a way to get high anyway? So maybe the human will, the reliance upon things human, is starting to prove futile too. Yes? Okay? And then it says that their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Did anyone have that experience? Probably everyone that ever shows up here, because we don't get here on a winning streak. Right? I haven't met that guy yet. Yeah, just out polishing the rolls and go check out AA. Right? Doesn't happen. Okay. So we got an abnormal reaction, and now we're going to jump, because we haven't done this in a long time, I'm going to jump all the way over to 18 of your book. We're in the chapter, There is a Solution. We're going to start at the top of 18. Now, the reason medical people believe that it's an illness is because they've proven there's a chemical difference in the addict. People that have addictive disorder have a chemical difference. Their brain reacts differently to the substance. This we know, okay? So we're going to start, a lot of us get here and we don't think we're really ill. And we live in a society who doesn't think we're really ill. One of the neat things about the insanity of addiction is although we're in full-blown insanity, we don't believe we're insane. Yes? Okay. So it says, an illness of this sort, and we have come to believe in an illness. So before you come to believe in power, you're going to come to believe you're sick. It's the process. If I don't believe that heroin, methamphetamine, cocaine, alcohol, some form or combination thereof is a power greater than me, I will never seek to grow spiritually. Simply won't happen. Okay? So, involves those about us in a way no other human sickness can. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him and no one is angry or hurt. So have you noticed that although we think of addiction as a disease, people aren't terribly sympathetic to us when we're ripping them off? Didn't happen to you? But not so with the alcoholic illness, for with it goes the annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. Now they use powerful words. Can you go with them? Because I can feel that. Who felt that? The annihilation. Do you guys remember the suffering of addiction? I mean active addiction. Why am I doing this? Who the fuck cares why I'm going? It's not safety. I've even won. Fuck that. Let's go. Right? You know what I'm talking about? Okay. All right. So then it says, all things worthwhile in life, it engulfs all those whose lives touch the sufferers. So how many of you have reflected now on what you put your family through based on trying to help others? So it does engulf all those that have any interaction with us at all, doesn't it? Okay? It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. Some of you go down with them to that powerless and unmanageable. Any of you have children that you took through this mess? Yes. Parents? So you know exactly what they're talking about. Okay. We hope this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. There are many. Highly competent psychiatrists who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. So how many of you got introduced to counselors, had people tell you, confront you, and you're like, yeah, I ain't copping to shit. Nothing's changed in 100 years. Okay, then it goes on to tell us that strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. So any of you feel like you're protecting the family from it, or you don't really know the truth, but they're demanding to know why'd you do that, you don't know why you did that, so you just make shit up just to get them off your back? You know what I'm talking about? You told me you weren't going to do it again, why'd you do it again? Oh, I had trouble at work. I was like, fuck, I didn't even go to work. Right? But they wanted an excuse, so I made one. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. So how many of you met the addict, recovered, who you could talk at for hours, and they didn't even hear anything until you gave them a window, and then they spoke directly to your spirit? You didn't even really remember what they said, but you did remember how you felt when they said it. Anybody know what I'm talking about? So the process that we're going to talk to you about, if you are alcoholic, is that process of, number one, finding out where the power is found and learning how to witness properly the facts about me, yes, so that I can be a proper witness to people who suffer. Okay? So you're uniquely qualified, not by your suffering, but by your experience of redemption. Yes? And because we know what they don't think anyone. How many of you can remember thinking nobody knows the way my mind works and how I feel? And then when you talk to somebody who knew your brand of crazy, it was worth taking a shot. Okay, so that's all they're talking about. Okay. That the man who is making this approach has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he's talking about, that his whole deportment shouts the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer, that he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever except a sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. These are the conditions we have found most effective. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. Okay, so none of us makes a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. How many of you got the impression that this was all about just go there and don't pick up no matter what and gather up chips? Because if all you do is fellowship, that's the impression you get. The goal of 12-step recovery is not to get a new chip. It is to wake up. A byproduct of being awake is that I don't feel a need to medicate me. But it is not the goal. Does that make sense? Okay. So, a much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. Practicing these principles in all my affairs. Starting to make sense? How many of you didn't know that there was actually a book of instruction? Do you know the fellowship of AA was named after the book and not the other way around? We need to let people know that. You're not in the program unless you're in these pages. You're in the fellowship. And it's not because we're correcting them, it's so they understand we have a program of recovery that gives us really good odds and a fellowship that has terrible odds. So if you're a gambler, read the book. Okay. All of us spend much of our spare time in the sort of effort we're going to describe. A few are fortunate enough to be so situated that they can give nearly all their time to the work. If we keep on the way we're going, there's little doubt that much good will result, but the surface of the problem would hardly be scratched. Those of us who live in large cities are overcome by the reflection that close by hundreds are dropping into oblivion every day. Have you noticed that on our streets?
Absolutely.
Have we been part of that?
Yes.
So we know the reality of that, yes? Many would recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. So I would ask you, if you are this person, why would you deny anyone else the opportunity that you've enjoyed to sit here and get another breath? So would it make sense to maybe go through the process, get into the manner of living so that you can be effective everywhere you go? Because we're not trying to be popular here, we're trying to be effective here. Okay. All right, so how then shall we present that which has been so freely given us? We've concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to our task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with the drinking problem. So what I'm going to do from there is I'm going to jump over a page to page 20, and I want to go to the first paragraph there. And we're going to just do a little self-diagnosis as we rock through the pages. You may have already asked yourself why it is that all of us became so very ill from drinking. Have you ever wondered when you found yourself really tore up to the point that no one needed to persuade you to get help?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? The suffering was great enough that you thought maybe I'd look into that other shit. And so notice they're doing it in third person because it's not an assault on my ego. I will fight to the death to defend my freedom that I find in chemicals. So the only way you're going to get them from me is let me see it from the outside in. And that's why we don't want to change the wording and the way they wrote this book, although we've heard people teach it over the years. It's not assaulting on my ego to find myself in somebody else's third-person observation. Does it make sense? Okay. So doubtless you're curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. So isn't that interesting? How many of you have been in AA long enough you've heard people say, we don't recover here? That used to be the mantra. Of course we recover here. We'd have to know what the definition of recovered was. They're very specific. 17 times they say recovered here. They only talk about recovering twice, and that's in the chapter 2, the wife, about the still drinking alcoholic. So clearly they're talking about an experience, yes? Okay. All right, so that what do I have to do? So if you're interested in how is that done, what do I have to do? That's the purpose of the book. It's the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. So the book is self-defining. We don't have to go listen to somebody in the room. If it's not in the book, it's not AA. It might be helpful. I'm not saying the fellowship's bad. It's a support fellowship, but you'll be better fellows if you do the program too. And you won't suffer as much. Because I don't suffer from the way you act or speak. I suffer from my thoughts about what I hear you say, right? And so I've got to get free of my limiting thoughts so that I can be more useful. Okay. All right, so before going into detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. So now we're going to talk about the various things we've tried. How many times have people said to this, I can take it or leave it alone? Why can't he? I guess they're talking about judgments. Have you ever had that happen?
Yeah.
Family members tell you about, Uncle Billy, he drank like you, he stopped. They're like, oh, fuck Uncle Billy. He's a quitter. I ain't no quitter. Okay, why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. You ever heard that kind of stuff? Okay. So I want to get to the bottom. Now these are commonplace observations on drinkers. I'm down to the second to last paragraph, which we hear all the time. So have we agreed we've heard those? Okay. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. They're not calling the people ignorant. They're saying it's an ignorant idea if you know anything about the root of the disease. So our job is to be examples to the people suffering, whether it's family or whether it's still suffering alcoholic, and eliminate, at least shine light into the ignorance and show them that they are responding differently because that's the way they're wired. Did you get here thinking, what's wrong with me? Did you have all kinds of people telling you what was wrong with you? Did it help? Well, I got news. There's nothing wrong with you. You're exactly the way God intended. Wake up. Let's go. We got shit to do. Right? Okay. All right. So we see that these are expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. We don't need them to understand. They can't understand. When they drink alcohol, they say, ooh, I'm getting tipsy, and they put it down. Have you ever seen anyone do that? Well, if you ever drink with a normal person, they just stop when they start to feel it. And I'm like, I wonder if I can get it without them looking. Or whatever. Okay. All right. So moderate drinkers. Now we're going to do a little self-diagnosis. Okay. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor become operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome, he may even need medical attention. So how many of you have had sufficient reason, had warnings of a doctor, still couldn't stop or moderate? How many of you kindred spirits like me who can't even conceive of moderate? So that was always off the table. I wasn't convinced of the stop. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't convinced I couldn't stop because I wasn't sure I'd applied myself adequately. You ever think you hadn't applied yourself adequately and a firm resolution, and then maybe 3 days later, 4 days later, you think, maybe I overreacted? None of that ever happened? Okay, that guy is what they call a hard drinker. He can still stop or moderate, but he's liable to end up in the same detox with me. He's liable to end up in the same recovery fellowship with me, and his reaction is very different than mine. And that doesn't make him wrong, but it'll kill me if I follow that advice. Amen. So it isn't about hating on them or telling them they're not alcoholic enough. It's about armed with the facts about yourself, which is why you might want a program while all they have is a fellowship. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But what about the real alcoholic? See if this is you. He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts. So it's always about a progressive loss of control. How many of you found that you started setting rules for yourself, how much you were going to spend, how much you were going to do, where you were going to do it, when you were going to do it? Did you break them all? Yes. That's an indication. So now that, if that's it, if I've had a progressive loss of control, I better dig a little deeper. So now they're going to start talking to me about this guy that's been puzzling me. Notice they're still in third person. Here's the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. Can you think of any? Anyone think of absurd things? Come on. Incredible? Tragic? How many of you have hurt people? Happens? Okay. He's a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. How many of you experienced a little personality change? Well, that's what they're describing, a little personality change, that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Seldom mildly intoxicated, he's always more or less insanely drunk. Where's my drinkers? When you were insanely drunk, did you not think yourself insanely drunk? Any of you ever go to the hospital and then they did a blood alcohol on you and you're like, dude, you should be hospitalized. Hence my arrival, right? You know what I'm talking about? Where's my opiate addicts? Do you ever go there trying to get a little relief from whatever you were going on? They finally gave you a little IV bump, and then you're out smoking and shit, and they're like, what the fuck? Okay, so we've roughly identified it. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature, but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. So how many of you were living normal lives, went to the dope house, lit up a pipe, and the next thing you're diving in a dumpster, as my friend Bobby said. You know what I'm talking about? Say, well, make room. Okay. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. Did you ever have an opportunity come up to you and now you're thinking maybe I could just celebrate a little because I finally got a break and then miss the break? I talk about I've known people that missed their custody hearings because of that shit. He's often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect he's incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising business career ahead of him. I bet you the highest percentage of you can relate to that. Right? You've always been able to put on a hustle. You've always been able to go bring in some bread. Yes? Have you also been able to burn it up with rapidity that no one can fathom?
Yes.
Okay. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He's a fellow that goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around, yet early the next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over the house to be certain no one can get his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. Any of you hiders? Drinkers were all hiders, weren't we? But most dope addicts are too. We just don't save it long enough to hide it. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. So any of you try a little better living through chemistry? Yeah. And then did you find out that accelerated things?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and he gets drunk all over again. Any of you get to the point where you just couldn't go anymore? Okay. I don't think people they think we're choosing not to go. Sometimes I even think I'm choosing not to go. I physically could not go. I couldn't get unsick enough to go. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off, and then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitarium. So does that sort of roughly describe some of our journeys? Yes. Okay. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary. If you find yourself in that, we're not saying you're a true alcoholic. What you're saying is you fit into those categories. You might want to read further. Does that make sense? Okay. But this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? This is the one I was thinking I was at before. So now I want to see why I have this weird reasoning, and maybe you want to learn that, huh? From what these people experience. If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes that one drink? So did you get to the point where you knew it was not safe for you to have even one, whatever it is you did, and then for whatever reason, you found yourself there again, and you had no earthly explanation for why?
Reason doesn't work.
Sometimes we think it'll be different. Sometimes we think what we're going through is just too painful. Sometimes we don't think at all.
Yep.
Opportunity arises and whoop. Yeah? Okay. Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? They want to know why, if you can go do your business, if you can go show up, if you can meet your other obligations, why, when you know that chemical's going to take all from you, why can't I bring to consciousness with sufficient force that memory of suffering and humiliation of even a few days ago and just not do it? Anyone with me?
Yeah.
We don't know, do we? We have no idea. We only know that our experience shows that's true. They just put the question mark there. They didn't give us the answers. The answers for you are in you. Okay. Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. So do we want other people's opinion, or do we want to rely on our experience?
Experience.
I had to conclude at one point, it doesn't matter why I do it. The fact is I do it. And I don't need to know why. I need to know I need access to power, so I don't. Okay. All right, so we're not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which make it virtually impossible for him to stop. So how many of you had the experiment of the first drink or the first drug? And even though you knew it wasn't going to turn out well, but you were just going to do the one, you seem no longer in charge of that mission. Okay. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. So that's what you want to own. If you've had that experience over and over, my experience is starting to match with alcoholics. That doesn't mean I am one, but I'm starting to sound like one. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. So what do they mean, academic and pointless? It's obvious to everybody, and why do I need to know why? The fact is I do. Right? Okay. Thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind, rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he'll offer you any one of 100 alibis. So can you think of some of the alibis you use? Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so he can't feel the ache. I wanted to see your reaction because they're going to tell us how we react. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off. Where's my laughers? Or become irritated and refuse to talk. Did all of you that cared to have one of those two reactions? Guys, we're teaching you to fish here. They wrote a book on how to fish for men. So all we need to do is see their reaction to what we're doing, follow their instruction, and we'll become more effective. Not necessarily popular, effective.
Right.
Okay. Once in a while, he may tell the truth. Now notice that. They're not holding me to rigorous honesty because they know I'm insane. But once in a while, I may tell the truth if it seems like it'll benefit me. Yeah? Okay. And the truth, strange to say, is he usually has no more idea why he took the first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they're satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts they do not really know why they do it. So now they're talking about a sensory experience. I can lie to me for a minute, but I can tell I'm lying to me. Have you ever had that experience? I can give you this excuse, I can sound confident, but I know that that's not it. They're talking about a conflict within. Can you get them? Because it's sensory. If you don't get that, we're never going to get you tapped into this tangible power we're trying to. So we've got to start to see the conflict going on within us first. Okay? Once this malady has a real hold, they're a baffled lot. There's the obsession that somehow, someday they'll beat the game, but they often suspect they're down for the count. Same battle. How many of you had that happen in active addiction? I'm hooked up. I'm going to run out. This isn't going to turn out. It's going to turn out badly. Okay, giddy up. Right? Bring a camera. This ought to be epic. No expectation of a different result. Anyone take it out that far? I used to hear that name. Doing the same thing, expecting a different result. I had no expectation of a different result. This is going to suck. Watch. Right? Okay. All right. That's, by the way, they don't define it that way here. When they talk about what insanity is here, they tell us an appalling lack of perspective. In light of my experience, to take one is crazy. Okay. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will. Did you have people hoping for you? How many of you were hoping for you? Were you like me and think, well, maybe I'll outgrow it? It's a passing thing. Happens to people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. The tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. Have you ever lost anything? Did you get it back?
No, it's lost.
No, they didn't say misplaced. So, when people think I'm controlling something, I better know I don't possess the power to control. Does that make sense? At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. Do you guys remember that time where you desperately wanted to stop? You found yourself crying alone, desperate, pleading with someone to stop you, and knowing, ain't gonna stop. Anyone know what I'm talking about? This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it's suspected. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago were without defense against the first drink. So the insanity of addiction is not the crazy shit that happens to me after I hook up. It's the thought that wins out that starts me again. So I'm legally insane, not by our law standards, but if I was just had another mental condition, I can't make a choice with an unsound mind. No one would rule against me. But with alcoholism addiction, that's not so, because we view it differently. But if you're an addict, you can't view it differently, because it's coming. Does that make sense? How many of you had that experience? Had plenty of knowledge about your condition, and then, whoops. Okay. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they're hazy and readily supplanted with that old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. So did you go through that? Yeah. It'll be different. Okay, some of us have that. There's a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. So, have you ever put your hand on a hot stove?
Once.
You don't have to do it over and over again, typically, right? And no one has to say, don't put your hand there, it's hot. You kind of like react. But is your addiction not the same as that hot stove given the consequences? But you return. Yes? Yeah. Okay. So now we're starting to look at what our insanity might look like, right? Because we're trying to come to believe in an illness at this stage. You get what they're telling us? So I got to identify with this and say, oh, that does seem a bit odd. Okay. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How many of you have done that? Casually just started off. Okay. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar to say to ourselves, for God's sake, how did I ever get started again? Has that ever happened? Casually got started and then realized now the girl is out. And that bitch does not get back in very easy. Okay. All right, so only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? How many of you have done that? Bill talks about it in his story. I might as well get good and drunk this time, right? But that's still me in the delusion of control. Because once I put it in my body, the insanity was put into my body. And after that, the drink takes the drink. Does it make sense? So, of course I'm going to keep doing it. I was never going to stop because I was insane when I did it the first time. You understand? So it's the strange mental blank spot that I've got to be protected against, not the drink. Does that make sense? Okay. So when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he's probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. So how many of you have had that kind of a warning? How many of you pushed it on to locked up? How many of you have even had to go to the hospital and have them try and walk you back? I do it. Yeah. Okay. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there will be thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop but cannot. So what we've got to do is quit judging our brothers and sisters, know our experience, get armed with the facts about ourselves, and we may be the best example of a program of recovery, but the program of recovery is a walking, talking big book, not a meeting list. Does that make sense? Okay. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. So the solution I offer to the suffering addict is not the process. None of us like the process. But we all love the power once we're introduced. I'm there to introduce them to the power that the process reveals. Does that make sense? See, it takes no power to not pick up no matter what. That's a non-action. What I need is a power to love the unlovely, to tolerate the intolerable, to be kinder than I feel like being, so I can be a proper witness. And in witnessing to others of the grace I've received, I experience a double dose of that grace. Does that make sense? Okay. So, but we saw that it really worked in others, and we'd come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we'd been living it. So are you in the process of coming to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as you've been living? Did you find that there was hopelessness and futility in a life with or without drugs at times? Yes. So the drugs, while they were a problem, weren't the main problem. Is that right? Okay. Okay, when therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us to pick up the simple spiritual tools laid at our feet. Now, a promise about picking up the... How many of you want to be rocketed? The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Now, you got to... Next week, we'll talk about step 2. They'll tell you about the demographics. Half of these guys were atheists or agnostics, but they admit to you, declare to you at this point, that regardless of their belief, their experience has changed their mind. They've had deep and effective spiritual experiences. Right? How many of you can relate to staring at a bottle, knowing it was going to get you drunk, but having to drink it to get drunk? Staring at a rig, knowing it was going to give you relief, but before you could ride the rocket, you were going to have to stick the vein. You're going to have to take a little action to ride the Spirit. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Okay. I can believe it all I want until I move into it. I'm not going to get the full effect. Okay? All right. So which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator is into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. Now, if you're religious, that probably means nothing. But if you're atheist or agnostic, and now you're declaring that this power, you may not be calling it what everyone else is calling it, but this power lives in you and expresses itself through you. And if they're telling us that as a part of the process. Does that make sense? So it's tangible power and a relevant manner of living. Not some bullshit you make up, not some bullshit you hear at the meeting. Precise instructions. Where and how? Deep down inside. How do I know it? Sometimes I have to search fearlessly. How will I recognize it? Power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowing into me. Tangible power, relevant manner of living that proves the power to me, through me. They sound like it might work. But that's what they promised. And they said it revolutionized their whole attitude about life and all these things. You know why? Because they found out that the world they lived in was reflecting how they were thinking and feeling, not causing it. They suffered from their perspective. And they had painted the world with a perspective of how they thought it ought to be versus how it was, and they suffered in it. And that's not real, that's not fact. So they're teaching us that's why there's question marks. Eyesight without insight is spiritual blindness. We're going to open our eyes by going inward. Does it make sense? Okay. All right, so he has commenced to accomplish those things for us we could never do by ourselves. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. So what would be a middle-of-the-road solution for an alcoholic as I am?
Sitting in meetings, not working the steps.
Pretty much anything short of a life of service to others. Probably armed with the facts about myself. And I have fallen short many times, hence the grace. But what we do is we do offer ourselves to others. If we don't do anything else, right? Where's my people that have been doing this well? How many of you have had a spiritual awakening as a result of steps and works with others? And we do that, why?
Best deal in town.
Because we always feel better after we do it. How many of you have actually started in the manner of living with constant prayer and meditation? Anyone here that gotten to where you're in a conscious walk, or at least tried it? Why do we do that? We do that because I'm under attack in my thought life all the time, and if I'm constantly in prayer and meditation, I'm demonstrating my dependence. Not only my dependence, but my knowledge of the dependence. Not demonstrating to you, demonstrating to me. I depend. They told me, Joe, you're chemically dependent. Then they introduced me to another power. I didn't lose my dependence. I switched my dependence. How many of you brand new in this thing didn't know any prayers, but someone taught you the serenity prayer? So everywhere you went, you're like, God, grant me the serenity prayer. We don't want you to stop that, man. We just want to get you some better prayers, more relevant. Does it make sense? Show me what you're showing me. Okay. We're in a position where life was becoming impossible. Is that true for you?
Absolutely.
And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. Please understand, an alternative is not a choice. We've already lost the power of choice. I'm already on this train wreck called addiction. I can either grab spiritual help or ride this bitch out. That's not a choice. Any of you get to where you knew that?
Yep.
Some of us have even made the decision maybe we're just going to ride it out. And then found out, if you're like me, I found out it's not tough enough to ride it out. I tried, and I kept waking up. Okay. not always in a good place either. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. You know what they're talking about? How many of you have been abstinent but miserable?
Yep.
Did you know you didn't have to do that? The program of recovery would relieve that. I had a friend of mine that asked me to take him through the steps, and then he went and got a surgery, and 2 days later I heard from his wife he'd shot himself in the head. So it's real. And, you know, we don't have to be that miserable if we don't want to, but we're treating a condition that underlies our addiction. That's what I was doing with my addiction, was treating that underlying condition. Okay, so the other was to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. So the requirement for all the promises they lay out from here is honestly want to, willing to make the effort. Nothing more is required. Does that make sense? Okay. So now what I want to do is go over to page 30. And look a little bit more about alcoholism. It said most of us have been unwilling to admit we were a real alcoholic. So that's why they went to the trouble of defining for us what a real alcoholic was. Right? How many of you sober have decided you didn't really need to do the steps? Maybe I don't really need to do this whole prayer and meditation. Okay, now this book was written so that people sober could read it and get into a manner of living. It wasn't intended, so it was never about the drinking. So I don't believe I'm a real alcoholic if I'm not doing all the things they suggest to maintain my spiritual condition. It's not trying to condemn anybody, but if you believe your condition's serious, you might want to step up your game. If anyone here ever leave here feeling inspired and then get cut off in traffic or have a thought come and you're just like right back into the motherfucks? So if we don't get free of those thoughts, we suffer in those thoughts, not from what happened. Does that make sense? And if I suffer in my thoughts long enough, I medicate. That's my history. So this whole thing is about disciplining my thought life, and I need you to help me because I need to turn my thoughts to you. Because see, I can still see what you need just like I can read about it in the book. But I can't see what I need. Does that make sense? Okay. So no person likes to believe he's bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it's not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. So now they're giving us a pass. Guys, there's an explanation. It's not an excuse. I have been sick, but I'm the only one that needs to know that. I don't need you to know I'm sick. I need to know I'm sick. But it does explain to me why there's been countless vain attempts, and it's not because I'm bad or I'm weak or I'm whatever. It's because I've been sick. I have a mental and emotional dis-ease that causes me to medicate. And then when I do medicate, I have an abnormal reaction that makes it impossible for me to stop medicating. Does that make sense? The idea that somehow someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. So, think about that in two ways. Number one, how many of you could control your drugs or your drinking, but you could not enjoy it, or you could enjoy it, but there was no control? So look at relational, the experience. Now, the main problem of the Alcoholic Center is in the mind, yes? Yeah. So this is meant to be read by a sober person, so now the idea that I can control and enjoy my thinking is the great obsession of every abnormal thinker. Yep. Which is why I might want, because my perception causes an abnormal reaction. Any of you ever had that happen? Anyone ever been baffled by the way you respond? The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many of us pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. Now I want you to see something here so you understand the way the book's written, so you get a sense of why it helps to have someone help you see what the book says. Because it describes an unfolding experience, and no one can read this book without someone showing them how. So it just can't. It's an impartation. They tried to send this out and let people read it on their own. It didn't work. The guy showed up drunk to tell his story. So it says, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self so we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. And all these years I've been coming in here and they've been telling me that's the first step in recovery. Are there two first steps?
No. Yes. One in the book.
There's the instruction. There's the experience. We just read you the experience. How many of you had the experience of, I really need help. Whatever it takes, I'm going to do it. When you weren't going to do shit before. So it went from here to here. We learned that. How many of you have found that that doesn't just happen one time, it happens every time you get disturbed? Teaches you to discipline your thought life. Why else would you do a 10th step in the middle of the day if you weren't having a disturbing thought life? They're starting to tell you the journey from head to heart. Where is this power found? Deep down inside. So if I'm in the power, nothing to fear. Does it make sense? We're not talking theology, we're talking relationship. How many of you have found you had the power to be kinder than you feel like being? Everyone, regardless of theology, has had that experience, right? Okay, what is that but a power greater than you operating through you? Okay, the ability, that power, that self-control, that consciousness can be improved through this process. Why would we not want to do it? How many of you have gone off on people and it caused you problems you didn't quite anticipate? So it would be a handy little trick for us to know, since we have abnormal reactions to many things. Any of you know what I'm talking about? I have abnormal reactions to many things. Many people, if you hit them in the head with a board, it knocks them out. If you hit me in the head with a board, you wake me the fuck up. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. Do you know the nature of delusion? I lie to me and I don't know I'm lying. So although we sit in rooms and we read that and then people bang on the table smashing their own delusions, the idea that you could smash your own delusion that you don't know you have is delusional. What smashes my delusion is a power changing my mind because of a relevant manner of living that proves a power to me, through me. Does that make sense? And that's where we're going to leave you. Next week we'll talk about 2.